And if you look at Elijah, just look at him. He's clearly jealous of Malcolm's media skills and charisma and charm and looks. Malcolm X was everything. Elijah wasn't. Malcolm had too much power, that natural, pure, reverent power, one that inspires people to action instead of that totalitarian dictator, oppressive power that's exploitative and destructive to the soul of the people. Of course, Elijah was jealous of Malcolm X's power, and once Elijah lost control of him, he needed to be gotten rid of. All 5 of X's assassins were black Muslims from the Nation of Islam, Mosque number 25. All of them. So I think Elijah ordered the hit personally, but without evidence, so that's just speculation. Elijah getting Malcolm X killed feels very much like how Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon got Salvador Allende in Chile assassinated. They meddled in Chile's affairs for years, giving the opposition money, but then once it happened, they were far from it, not far from it, they were far from it enough so their deniability was plausible. If you're, stupid, if you can't see through the smoke screen. Nixon liked to say, well, just keep it out of my office. Yeah, go ahead, get him assassinated, but keep it out of my office. Meaning, if it comes out that they found out you were connected to me and we're a part of this, then you're going to fall on the sword, and I'm going to pretend like I had nothing to do with it. It was your fault. And so that's essentially keep it out of my office, meaning go ahead and do some corrupt shit. If you get caught, then you'll go down with it. You'll get thrown under the bus. But it's okay if you go ahead and do it. So that's actually being generous to Elijah. And then just listen to what Elijah said after Malcolm X was killed. Just listen to him.
If you continue to kill, you have to continue to kill. Malcolm is the victim of his own preaching. He preached violence, and so he becomes the victim of it.
You do not personally feel that any member of the Brotherhood of Islam committed this crime?
No. We don't do a thing like that. If you continue to kill, you have to continue to kill.
Do you feel possibly something that Malcolm brought on himself then?
Well, he did bring all of it on himself. If he had stayed with us, following me, he would not have been dead today. He would have been a living man today.
History proves that the white man is a devil. I feel like Elijah basically just told on himself. He said that Malcolm was a victim of his own preaching, which is what Malcolm X said that the media was going to say that he was, a preacher of hate. Now Elijah is saying that, but Elijah is saying that for himself. He's saying, he was preaching hatred towards me. So that's why he was a victim of his own preaching. He was preaching hate towards me, so then I made him a victim of his own preaching. So Malcolm X was preaching that Elijah is fucking all those teenage girls and knocking them up, and then he was pretending like he wasn't doing that, and Elijah wanted to make Malcolm a victim of that preaching. Elijah Muhammad also said that Malcolm X's assassination was the work of God. It's the work of God. God did this.
Do it in account with any serious trouble from Malcolm's death. This death of Malcolm, God himself had something to do with that. And I think the people will learn that this was some work of God himself.
Let's have a round of applause for the messenger of Allah.
And he's paternalistic. Elijah's paternalistic. He said if Malcolm would have just been a good boy. So Elijah was essentially saying if Malcolm would have just been a good boy, he could have made it far with Elijah's cult, but instead Malcolm was a victim of his own preaching. He brought it all on himself. X was being murdered. X being murdered to Elijah was divine intervention. And he's, got a personal one-on-one relationship with God. So it wasn't just unnecessary bloodshed. It was divine bloodshed for Elijah. So it's weird how Elijah says that it's God's work with Malcolm X being murdered. But he didn't have shit to say when Ronald Stokes was killed. He said, let's not go to war. A provocation is no reason to go to war. Overall, Elijah Muhammad had 8 children with his wife Clara. Elijah also had 3 children with Lucille Rosary Muhammad, 1 child with Evelyn Muhammad, and 4 children with Tanetta Muhammad, and he's fathered other children from other relationships. In all, it's estimated that the disgusting, lowlife, and dishonorable, degenerate Elijah Muhammad has had 21 children, most of them out of wedlock, in direct contradiction with his own Quran and Muslim teachings. Then Malcolm X went to Mecca, saw a different light. He wasn't so exclusive, and he believed in humankind. I even heard Malcolm X say he didn't care what religion you were a part of. 9 baby mamas, though? 9? Maybe 10, 11, I don't know. Nobody can keep track of this guy. 2 days before Malcolm X was killed, he told a reporter that a threat was out on his life. Malcolm X felt like he had actually died 20 years ago. And so he was prepared to die for his cause, to die a martyr. And that's why he felt no fear. He wasn't afraid of anybody or anything, because he had accepted that by fighting for freedom, he was going to be a dead man already. The threat on his life was in fulfillment of the prophecy. So I put Malcolm X's body right at the feet of Elijah Muhammad. Elijah could kiss my ass. Elijah Muhammad's superstitious, tyrannical, hypocritical, disloyal, selfish, narcissist, cheating, lying, fraudulent, rapist, oppressor of women, underage women. No telling how young these underage girls were who were his secretaries and who were getting pregnant. So apparently they were old enough to have children, right? Or at least the ones that got pregnant were. He's an oppressor, molester. He's a disgusting, he's no person to idolize and put on a pedestal and, deify as if he is. He's not Jesus, come on. Elijah Muhammad was born Elijah Robert Poole in Sandersville, Georgia in 1897. He died when he was 77 years old. In 1975 and 1965, he was a 67-year-old man. 67 years old. All them nasty, that nasty, wrinkled, disgusting balls on all the, beautiful young women, right? He tainted them all with his disgusting, creepy, dirty old manness, with his predatory tactics on unsuspecting underage girls. Where'd they come from? Why are they in these chairs? Why are they secretaries for him? And then you're telling me nobody in the office knew that this was going on? Somebody had to have been paying attention. So death is the great neutralizer. Death takes away good men, unfortunately. But they also take away the bad men, like Elijah Muhammad. Eventually, Elijah Muhammad, when he's 77 years old in 1975, 10 years after Malcolm X had been killed, he's going to die from organ failure. Heart failure stemming from heart disease, diabetes, bronchitis, asthma. So that's how he died. Organ failure. Heart failure, heart disease, diabetes, bronchitis, and asthma. So not even the wicked can escape death. So I got 2 more sections. First, I'm going to talk about the government agents who are following Malcolm, who were very much a part of this. And then the fate of all 5 of Malcolm X's 5 assassins. What happened to them all? There was 5. What happened to Malcolm X's 5 assassins? Coming up. Okay.
What happened to the prophets that came to you and your people from Moses until today? What happened to them according to your own history? You beat them. You disgraced them. And some you persecuted, put in prison houses, and some you killed. You are the people that is guilty of killing and taking the lives of the prophets of God in the past. I'm the last one. Yes, sir. And you desire to take my life. Yes. But I say you will not harm even so much a hair on my head unless it's the will of Allah.
Scripture which we have with us in Bible and Quran, I think, excuse me, I think we are at a time.
In the past past, the greatest weapon the white man has had has been his ability to divide and conquer. If I take my hand and slap you, you don't feel it. It may sting you because these digits are separated. But all I have to do to put you back in your place is to bring these digits together.
If he had stayed with us, following me, he would not have been dead today. He would have been a living man today.
If ballots don't work, bullets will.
I believe, Malcolm, just that. I don't think we should use the word that do you think, but I have examples. Excuse me, for the world. And these men that follow me and women,
some of my own brothers sought to take my life, planned my death. But I have never told one to come after you with evil.
Scripture which we have with us in Bible and Quran, I think.
The white man made the mistake of letting me read his history books. He made the mistake of teaching me that Patrick Henry was a patriot. And George Washington. There wasn't nothing non-violent about old Pat or George Washington.
If we look at that prophesy.
But you help him anyway. She said, it ain't nothing but jealousy. She said, it ain't nothing but jealousy, 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 jealousy.
My alma mater was books, a good library. I could spend the rest of my life reading, just satisfying my curiosity.
Help my husband. And look at the word. Elijah Muhammad was not jealous of me or Malcolm. You can't be a jealous person or an envious person and have the Spirit of God in you.
This is kind of the war season to become.
I don't even call it violence when it's in self-defense. I call it intelligence.
Some of us knew.
Have you received threats on your life?
Oh, yes.
What do you mean?
When you understand the makeup of the Muslim movement and the psychology of the Muslim movement, as long as if I myself, by having confidence in the leader of the Muslim movement, if someone came to me and I had no knowledge whatsoever of what had taken place, and they told me what I'm saying, I would kill them myself. The only thing that would prevent me from killing someone who made a statement like this, they would have to be able to let me know that it's true. Now, if anyone had come to me other than Mr. Muhammad's son, I never would have believed it, even enough to look into it. But I had been around him so closely, I had seen indications of the reality of it, but my religious sincerity made me block it out of my mind.
History proves that the white man is a devil.
We have information that several members of Malcolm X, the organization to which Malcolm X belongs, have planned to journey to Chicago to take retaliatory measures.
Is this information from New York police?
From New York police and from other sources as well.
And you don't hear me on the radio condemning Imam Warithuddin. You don't hear me on the radio speaking against those who speak against me. Let them say what they want. My work is clear. I'm a strong piece of board in the corner of the building, upholding the weight not of the tiny nation, but of 30 million or more black people in America.
Scripture which we have with us in Bible and Quran, I think, excuse me, I think we are at a time, that's the only thing that I can see in such movements as going, marching on people and trying to force yourself. The base of it is forcing yourself on people that you're not wanted.
God has made me a better man for you than Malcolm X. I'm standing where Malcolm would have stood if he had the character to stand where I'm standing.
I think we should qualify for such place first. That means cleaning up ourselves internally and externally as well. And in such way that no one would accept you in that way of forcing or even appealing for. I think
both John Ali and Gene Roberts were both well-documented undercover agents who had infiltrated Malcolm X's group. Brother Gene is what he was affectionately known as. Even Malcolm X called him Brother Gene. Brother Gene Roberts was an undercover New York Police Department officer, part of the Bureau of Special Services, the BOSS division, the BOSS division. And they worked in conjunction with the FBI. And Brother Gene, surprisingly, was Malcolm X's chief, one of his chiefs of security. So this is a very high-level infiltration. So he's a NYPD officer who also worked in conjunction with the FBI, and he was Malcolm X's chiefs of security, one of them. Now, Brother Gene Roberts was right there at the scene of the assassination of Malcolm X. He was in the middle of the melee, getting shot or shooting at somebody, something, I don't know. But the famous picture where it looks like Gene Roberts is giving Malcolm X mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. There's a famous picture where it looks like Gene Roberts is giving Malcolm X mouth-to-mouth resuscitation when he is bloodied on the ground. February 21st, 1965, in the Audubon Ballroom. In the Audubon Ballroom. Some speculate, however, that perhaps Gene Roberts wasn't trying to revive Malcolm, but he was actually checking Malcolm's vitals in order to get a solid confirmation on the kill. Malcolm X affectionately called Gene Roberts Brother Gene. Joan Roberts, Brother Gene Roberts' wife, actually grabbed Betty Shabazz, Malcolm's wife, who was also a doctor. Joan Roberts was preventing Betty Shabazz from getting to Malcolm as he lay on the ground bleeding and dying until Betty Shabazz threw Joan Roberts into the wall and escaped from Joan Roberts' grip. Then she was able to get to her dying husband. She's a doctor trying to get to her dying husband, and Joan Roberts stops her. Gene Roberts went on to become a disruptive force in the Black Panther. Now, John Ali was straight up an FBI informant. John Ali sowed seeds of dissent between Malcolm X and Elijah, which is precisely what J. Edgar Hoover wanted him and all the FBI to do. On June 5th, 1964, Hoover sent a telegram to the FBI's New York office that simply and plainly instructed, do something about Malcolm X. Enough of this black violence in New York. Do something about Malcolm X. J. Edgar Hoover orders the FBI's New York office. This is 1 year prior to his assassination. J. Edgar Hoover wanted to stop the rise of a black messiah. He was afraid that a black messiah could rise up and unify and electrify the militant black nationalist movement. And he thought that Malcolm X could be such a messiah. An FBI document says that John X. Ali met with Talmadge Hayer, one of the 5 assassins of Malcolm X, the night before his assassination. John X. Ali would get pissed off because Malcolm X was trying to duck him the day of the assassination. But John Ali insisted that he was trying to protect Malcolm X. He wasn't, but he was sitting there saying, I'm trying to protect you. Why are you trying to duck me?
Brother Thomas 15X, you were a lieutenant in the Fruit of Islam. And the Fruit of Islam is the paramilitary unit of the Nation of Islam.
Exactly.
Now, you said that you did deny, I've read this and many things, that you did have a meeting.
Right.
Was this the night before or the day before Malcolm was killed? Couple days.
Couple days.
Was this at the New York Hilton Hotel?
No, we was at, matter of fact, I escorted him to the hotel, and he ducked me. I lost him some kind of way, and I got suspicious of that because I'm there to secure you. Why are you ducking me?
John X. Ali, an FBI agent who infiltrated the highest level of the Nation of Islam. He was the National Secretary, Stalin started out by being the general secretary. So John X. Ali became the Nation of Islam's national secretary, and he could provide the floor plan since he was living with Malcolm X at the time. And he lived with Malcolm X for about 3 to 4 years.
Well, you know, there have been rumors that you was a double agent working for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. Did you want to comment on that?
Well, I was no agent for the FBI or any other entity of the United States, the Boy Scouts, the church, the Rotary Club, or any entity. They all were the same to the messenger. He didn't view one.
But we had that on 119th Street. We had a news office, Muhammad Speaks.
And who was at this meeting?
All the lieutenants.
How many lieutenants were there?
It was, I wouldn't say all, there was...
John X. Ali also played a part in the firebombing of Malcolm X's house 1 week prior to his assassination. This is the FBI. Double agent for the FBI. Firebombing Malcolm X's house after getting the order from J. Edgar Hoover to do something about Malcolm X. Firebombed his house 1 week prior to the assassination. John X. Ali is one dirty, rotten, two-faced son of a bitch. Supposedly, this is a report that's floating out there, National Secretary John Ali, by the orders of Elijah Muhammad Jr., is actually the man who assembled the 10-man special team codenamed Task Force FARD, comprising of Nation of Islam soldiers from the New Jersey Mosque 25 and New York Mosque number 7, which carried out the February 21st, 1965 assassination of Malcolm X. John Ali is a bad guy. He's a bad dude. FBI. So the FBI was a part of the Nation of Islam. Talked to the assassin right beforehand. The NYPD was right there on the scene, undercover, supposedly resuscitating or making sure the kill shot was, good. There's another name, Ray Woods. His name was mentioned. There was 2 people who was arrested that day, but the second person the name was never mentioned or released to the public. And somebody believes that it could have been, or they saw their name, Raymond Wood. And Raymond Wood is also an undercover New York Police Department. It says Bossy. I don't know if it's different. Bureau of Special Services and Investigation. So it's not just the Boss Division, but the Bossy Division. And his name has been floated as the other man that was arrested that day. So Ray Wood and Gene Roberts' records have not been released by the NYPD or the FBI. So we don't know any of what these 2 people have, what Gene Roberts and Ray Wood has accomplished. What is Raymond A. Wood and Gene Roberts? What would their career tell us? What could we learn from their notes and records? Malcolm X personally believed that the CIA nearly killed him by poisoning him in Cairo, Egypt in late July 1964. Malcolm said CIA agents had always made their presence known when he traveled abroad as a way to intimidate him. So that it was, as broad as daylight. They would just ride out, just follow Malcolm at wherever he went. In a Cairo restaurant, Malcolm felt the poison in his food in his mouth. And then he realized that the waiter was somebody he knew from New York. So he recognized the person. Thought it was more than just a coincidence and started tasting the poison. They were able to get Malcolm X to the hospital and get his stomach pumped, and he was barely saved. The doctor there verified that Malcolm X had indeed been poisoned. Now, the last sort of major question I'm going to ask about his assassination when it comes to the government authorities is, where's the police coverage? So Malcolm X is a prominent figure. Typically, the police would be present at one of his events. And the Chicago police always provided protection for him.
Lieutenant Phillips didn't know at that time. Now, when we received this information, naturally, we took precautions here in Chicago to safeguard his presence while he was here.
And even if it wasn't to provide protection for him, maybe to keep the, his followers from getting out of control. Perhaps that's another reason for the police to be at Malcolm X's event. Detroit Red's house had just been firebombed 1 month before. His baby girls were nearly killed. Threats had already been made against Malcolm X. An assassination attempt was very possible. But yet, on February 21st, not one officer was stationed at the entrance to the Audubon Ballroom where the meeting took place. And while there were 2 uniformed officers inside the building, they remained in a smaller room at a distance from the main event area, only for a small period of time. They would later move to the hospital across the street. The NYPD still has documents they haven't released pertaining to Malcolm's assassination. So New York needs to release all of their documents. So does the FBI. The FBI has 20,000 pages of files about Malcolm X, and they wanted to directly monitor and disrupt him, right? Do something about Malcolm X, J. Edgar Hoover says to his New York office. They have the blood of Fred Hampton on their hands too, the FBI does. Conspiracy is supposed to be a cuss word, but it shouldn't be. People conspire all the time. Anytime people get together and make a collective decision, hey, let's go out to the bar. Hey, let's start a little league team. Hey, let's start a bank. Hey, parents conspire on their children. Children conspire to duck their parents. Teachers, administrators, principals, and school meetings conspire with their curriculum, right, against the students. Cops conspire against the public. So do corporations. Corporations conspire on how to get as much of the public's money as they can. People are always conspiring. They are always conspiring all the time about anything and anybody in all different directions. And the assassination of Malcolm X was definitely a conspiracy because a group of men got together, they crowded around together, and they conspired to murder Malcolm X. That was a conspiracy. So we know that there's at least 5 men who's a part of this conspiracy. William X. Bradley, Leon X. Davis, Talmadge Hayer, Wilbur McKinley, and Albert Benjamin Thomas. Those are the 5 people that was a part of this conspiracy. All 5 of them, there was 1 with a shotgun, 2 with handguns, 2 diverting. And so between those 5 men, they all conspired to assassinate Malcolm X that night. John X. Ali met with the shooters the night before X was killed. So he could probably be included in that list of responsible parties as well. So you got 6 men. So at least 6 members of the Nation of Islam conspired to kill Malcolm X. Now the question is, who else is a part of the conspiracy? Who else is a part of this conspiring to kill Malcolm X? Who else is a part of that conversation? There's a lot of people that it could be. At the end of Malcolm's life, he had developed a broad internationalist vision of emancipatory power, far better than any other single individual had at that point. Malcolm came out against the Vietnam War in 1964. The FBI was afraid he was going to become a black messiah. That's why they enlisted John X. Ali to infiltrate him. The CIA followed Malcolm around overtly wherever he went as he flew abroad. And the NYPD didn't provide protection for Malcolm on that day. They had an undercover in Malcolm's group as a chief of security. So it's not just a bunch of random coincidences. At the very most, the NYPD, FBI, and CIA were involved in the conspiring, the plotting, and at the very least, the assassination converged upon their self-interest. So they just turned their heads. So that's my take on the government being involved in Malcolm X's assassination. 4 out of the 5 Malcolm X assassins got away scot-free. So you actually even had Willie X. Bradley, a.k.a. Al-Mustafa Shabazz, in jail when Talmadge Hayer, who signed his 1977 affidavit fingering Willie X. Bradley, a.k.a. Al-Mustafa Shabazz, as the triggerman, and the others involved, hoping to exonerate Thomas 15X Johnson and Norman 3X Butler, since Talmadge knew that they didn't do it. So the authorities ignored this new piece of vital information, and they didn't go after anybody. There's an affidavit. They could have reinvestigated the case. They could have reopened the case. History proves that the white man is a devil.
Malcolm is the victim of his own preaching. He preached for us, and so he became the victim of it.
You do not personally feel that anyone, any member of the Brotherhood of Islam committed this crime?
No, we don't do a thing like that.
But instead of reopening the case and not even talking to William Bradley when he was sitting in jail at that time, Talmadge Hayer, Thomas Hagen, a.k.a. the same guy, Thomas Hagen, Talmadge Hayer, and then he's got a Muslim name now. He was convicted. That's the man that the crowd had caught and beat up, and that was the one man they were able to arrest. He was convicted in the 1966 trial, but so were two other men, Thomas 15X Johnson, a.k.a. Khalil Islam, and Norman 3X Butler, a.k.a. Muhammad Abd al-Aziz. Okay, ABD. So, Norman 3X and Thomas 15X. Thomas 15X Johnson, a.k.a. Khalil Islam, and Norman 3X Butler, a.k.a. Muhammad Abd al-Aziz, were wrongly convicted for Malcolm's assassination. All three of those guys, Talmadge Hayer and Thomas 15X and Norman 3X, received 20 years to life sentences. Norman 3X Butler was eventually paroled in 1985, 19 years after he'd been behind bars for 19 years. Thomas 15X Johnson was paroled in 1987, 21 years after he had been behind bars. So they both essentially fulfilled their 20-year sentences. He was, after Norman 3X Butler, a.k.a. Muhammad Abdul Aziz. Okay. So Muhammad Abdul Aziz, who's Norman 3X Butler, he was paroled in 1985 after he was behind bars for 19 years. Then he becomes the head of Harlem's Mosque in 1998. So 13 years later, is he rewarded for the time he spent for taking, the sentence of the guilty parties? Is that why he got it? Or maybe because he was a part of the thing? That's always still a possibility too. But I believe Marable Manning on this. Thomas 15X Johnson, he changed his name to Khalil Islam. He was released in 1987, and he maintained his innocence until his death in August 2009. So, Thomas 15X is dead. So since Talmadge Hayer, Thomas Hagen, felt responsible for Thomas 15X and Norman 3X going to jail, since he refused to name anybody who conspired against him, he eventually signed an affidavit in 1977. So when they said in the 1966 trial, so did these two men help you kill Malcolm X? And he said no. They said, well, who did? He's like, I'm not going to say. And so he felt like he was responsible for why those two men had got convicted. So he signs an affidavit, and he says it wasn't those two men. He said it was these other men. Here are the 5 people who assassinated Malcolm X. Willie X. Bradley, a.k.a. Al-Mustafa Shabazz. Leon X. Davis. Talmadge Hayer, of course, which we already know, who now goes by Mujahid Abdul Halim. Wilbur McKinley. And Albert Benjamin Thomas. So he, instead of keeping his tongue, quiet, he went ahead and pointed out to 4 other guys, and he said them by name and said that they were the responsible parties, and it wasn't the 2 people behind bars. While Talmadge Hayer was behind bars, he was behind bars for 45 years. He earned a bachelor's and master's degree. He filed 16 times for parole, denied each time, but in 1988, he was allowed to participate in a work release program where he could work outside the prison, and it required him to only spend 2 days a week in a minimum security facility in Manhattan. The rest of the week, he was allowed to stay with his wife and children. So essentially, in 1988, he got out. Then he did some other things, a counselor, the homeless shelter at Ward's Island fast food restaurant. He worked in Crown Heights Youth Collective. March 2010, you had Hagen, Thomas Hagen, Talmadge Hayer, was released. He was finally granted parole and was released from prison at the end of April. He is still a practicing Muslim. And he's left the Nation of Islam, no longer agreeing with their ideology, and he has expressed regret for having shot Malcolm X. He's the only one that actually who got punished for the crime, the horrible crime of Malcolm X's death. So, out of Malcolm X's 5 assassins, only Talmadge Hayer paid for his crime. 2 of the others may be dead, which means at the very least that 2 of Malcolm X's assassins still live on. And at the most, 4 of them do, without ever being punished or receiving any consequences whatsoever, when there's no statute of limitations on murder. William Willie X. Bradley, still living in Newark, New Jersey. In 1989, Leon X. Davis was reported to be living in Patterson, New Jersey. Wilbur McKinley, very little is known about him. One researcher thinks he's dead. Albert Benjamin Thomas was supposedly killed by a .44 caliber pistol, point blank range in a domestic dispute in Florida in 1986. Or maybe that's just some bullshit to keep his enemies at bay. The same could be said about Wilbur McKinley. 4 of the 5 of Malcolm X's assassins got away scot-free for their bloodshed, for ending the life of the great prince. Could you imagine if we as a society knew that 4 of JFK's assassins who got away scot-free with their assassination and still did nothing about it? That would kind of seem insane, wouldn't it? Didn't Lincoln, even the bartender who listened to Lincoln's conspirators, got hung? And there's no statute of limitations on murder.
A man that you know very well, I won't call his name, robbed the nation when we were poor of $25,000 because we were trying to get back the old home of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the mosque. And he said he could deliver. He needed $25,000.
For such thing to happen, it is disgrace.
I think most people would agree with that. Don't you find that so, that most people would share that view, at least?
I think all civilized men will.
The problems in America over the past few years have resulted in things like the problems in Selma, Alabama.
He was a friend of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, so he said, but he took our money. And the brothers were so angry they wanted to take his head. I said, leave him alone. I've been slandered by my own brothers.
If you said that you were involved at that time, you also said at that time that these 2 brothers were not involved, but they didn't believe you then. What is the difference in the information you're bringing forth now that would convince someone that you're now giving a more accurate story?
Well, at the time, I had stated on the witness stand that the brothers was not involved, but I was asked to give names of the individuals who was involved in the case with me. And at that time, I didn't give the names of the other brothers that took part in the assassination or the killing of Malcolm X. I didn't give the names. And because I didn't give the names, it was felt that, well, perhaps I was just trying to free the other brothers. I was trying to take the weight myself and protect them. And this seems to have been the feelings at that time. You know, this is the way that things was going. But I couldn't, at the time, there was a lot of things involved. You know, I really didn't feel that I could state names. I had to disassociate myself from the Nation of Islam at the time. I said that I wasn't a Muslim. Things like this here, because I was trying to protect the Nation of Islam at the time. I didn't want to, like, draw the nation into it on my part. So I was really trying to protect the nation, right? But it got to a point, originally when the trial first started, I actually felt that the brothers would be cut loose. I didn't think that they was going to be convicted until this trial started going on, and it became obvious what was being done. And at that point, you know, I had to say something. And this is when I said what I said, that they were not involved.
Known in the black Muslim community of Newark, New Jersey for 45 years. The man in this freeze frame with his back to the camera is shotgun assassin William Bradley.
I could see then that there are many white people in this country who will side with the Negro in whatever he has to do to protect himself.
You have changed your attitude about the white man in the United States to some extent.
Well, I've broadened my scope. Travel broadens your scope. It gives you a wider understanding. And I have, in my many lectures on college campuses, seen many whites, even as a black Muslim, whose reaction to much of what I had to say showed me that they were genuinely concerned. Some weren't genuinely concerned, but many of them were. And this element is increasing.
But that's a considerable change of opinion in Malcolm X.
No, today I'm speaking for myself. Formerly I spoke for Elijah Muhammad. And everything I said was, Elijah Muhammad teaches us thus and so. I'm speaking now from what I think, from what I have seen, from what I have analyzed, and the conclusions that I have reached.
And the white man is no longer the devil, and he is no longer bound to be evil.
The Holy Quran teaches us to judge a man by his conscious behavior, by his intention. And my reason for going to Mecca was to get a better understanding of the religion of Islam and what the Quran teaches. So I judge a man by his conscious behavior. I am not a racist. I don't subscribe to any of the tenets of racism.
Then there are good whites and good blacks and bad whites and blacks.
It's not a case of being good and bad, good or bad blacks and whites. It's a case of being good or bad human beings.
Well, where does your financing come from now?
Right now I have no financing. The only financing we have are the Muslims who are still with me.
You have to expect the Negroes to rise up sooner or later.
Oh, yes.
What does that mean?
Well, just the same thing that it meant in South Vietnam and these other places where you find oppressed people. Sooner or later, they rise up against the oppressor. When the Jews were being brutalized in Poland, there came a time when they couldn't take it anymore, and they fought back. They didn't have too much to fight with, but they fought back. And I think every oppressed people, no matter how meek and humble they are, after you drive them so far, they're going to strike back.
Well, does that mean that you expect to organize battalions or paramilitary units in various Negro ghettos around the country and establish this coming summer for violent action?
No, but I think that most Afro-Americans, so-called Negroes, have reached the point of no return and are taking it upon themselves to be prepared if the necessity ever arrives where they will have to do something to defend themselves.
Well, I guess they did make an effort, yes.
Did they offer you a bodyguard or anything like that?
No.
Do you want police protection?
Were you aware that she made Malcolm X made application for a gun permit as late as last Thursday?
Did he ever get the gun that he made application?
Well, how do you support yourself, Malcolm?
Well, I'm unsupported.
Well, you seem to be fairly well fed and
well fortunately, while I was among the Muslims, I never lived beyond my means, and I have learned how to live within means. And I still have the clothes that that was provided for me at that time. I'm in the house that was provided for me, although we're in a court battle, they're trying to get it back. And I have made this statement to them concerning the house that they could have it. If they would take me back, if they would permit me to come before the Muslim movement, the rank and file, and explain or defend myself against all of the charges that they've made against me, they could have the house. But they are going contrary to their own laws by standing up in the mosque and indicting me, but never giving me a chance to defend myself. And they say that no one can judge me but Mr. Muhammad. In this case, Mr. Muhammad can't sit as judge because he's involved in the case.
Excuse me. I think we are at a time to Ezekiel and the Bible of the dry bone which represents our people as we are. They said the hopes was lost.
Within themselves or among themselves?
Within and among themselves, I don't think it's necessary. If we would do just a bit.
And I had stated in a newspaper article about an effort to take my life back in January, and at that time the Muslims denied it. In fact, they tried to make it appear to my brother that I was insane. But on a program in Chicago called Hotline, that's moderated by Wesley South, John Ali, the national secretary, admitted, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, one of these days last week, that they absolutely were going to kill me.
You get out of the... Take to...
I'm on the phone with John Ali, former secretary, national secretary for the Nation of Islam under the leadership of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Of justice. And just say, you are justified to live in the sun here somewhere on the earth, and I will help you to try to get a place somewhere where you can live in the sun.
It's not a case of becoming a leader of a violent group. I don't think any group, even that's ready, wants violence. It's a case of...
Is this not, Minister Malcolm, a call to action of sorts that you are raising here and now?
I don't have to raise a call to action. And this is what I'm trying to make white people see. They have lost their ability to be objective where the race problem is concerned, primarily because they know that no real meaningful results have come from the Negro struggle. And in defense of this, they always call it or label it violence.
You really believe that any meaningful result is going to come from violence?
It's not a case of violence. I think that, see, if you could get away from looking at it as violence.
As others, and that's banish all argument, dissatisfaction, disagreement. If he had stayed with us, following me, he would not have been dead today. He would have been a living man today. I believe Malcolm and the evil thinkings of nations, and that they was cut off from their part. I think that is very